All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dental Disruptors Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Larson. This is my co-host, Clint Berry. Say hi, Clint.
Hello.
And Clint decided to get a little bit creative with our room today. As you'll notice, we've got a fun background, put our logo up on the wall, change things around. We've got to keep it interesting, right?
And I love it.
And we've had some fun recently finding out who some of our listeners are and hearing some fun stories that people have actually listened to what we have to say and found some useful information from it.
It shocks me.
It really does. But for all of you that have listened and continue to listen, we are grateful for you. We hope that we can continue to bring you some good information that's beneficial, brings value to whatever it is that you're doing or building. And that was our goal with this all along. So fun. Anyway, okay, so let's get started with our topic for today. And this is a topic that I don't know why we didn't talk about this sooner, because we do this every single day. But we wanted to talk about what is a data warehouse for those that do not know, and why every DSO needs one. So should be a fun topic today. We have lots of thoughts to share on that. But let's just start with that. I'll kind of just ask questions to Clint. I'll make some comments here and there, but Clint will probably do most of the explaining.
Maybe.
As we go through this.
Yeah.
So, Clint, give us a quick explanation in layman's terms. What is a data warehouse? We'll just start there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to explain it in words that make sense. Hopefully,
and maybe
to everyone.
How is it different from just like a regular
database
reporting tool? Right?
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So a data warehouse is actually a central place to store data from multiple sources for analysis or business intelligence or connecting it to AI. It's a central place to store data from multiple sources. And so in dental, this can mean a lot of different things. If you're a multi-location practice and every office is on a different system or on a system that's in the office, like an on-premise system, or even some cloud systems that are completely separate, it aggregates the data from all those locations it can into one place so that you have one place to look at all the data. That's an example. Another source could be financial data. You can store financial data in there. Another source could be your communication data, like phone system data, patient engagement data. If you have Weave or NextHealth, you could get that data and stick it in there as well. So then you can have this holistic, unified view of all your locations and all the data in one, and it allows you to do some really powerful things.
So how is that different from a regular reporting tool then?
Yeah, I think at least as they started out, the original reporting tools like Dental Intel, Jarvis, Practice by Numbers, originally was primarily practice data. So around the practice management system, I think they're trying to broaden their horizons a little bit more. And you see new players coming in like OS Dental, who are aggregating financial data, for instance, and trying to augment it with more and more data. But originally, I think those practice reporting tools, analytics tools were primarily around the practice data, which is only a small part of it's a big part, but it's not the whole picture of what's going on in an office. And I think there's some key KPIs that it's going to not be able to have because it doesn't have access to all the data.
Yeah, see our episode about the lead conversions. It would be an example. I think that was like our third episode or something like that.
Yeah, how do you measure your lead conversion, your close rate from new patients calling in if you don't have access to the call records and probably call transcriptions?
Yeah. So why should a DSO start thinking about centralizing their data into a data warehouse?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest reasons right now that this is becoming more and more important is the advent of AI. And AI requires data to train, to interact, things like that. And so I think that's a big one. It's like if you want to be at the cutting edge, I know so many dental offices talk about staffing issues. AI is hopefully going to augment those if not now, very, very soon, but it needs access to the data to do that. And so getting yourself set up with a data warehouse gives you a step ahead when you're trying to augment with AI. But there's also other things too. Like there's a whole bunch of benefits that can come from doing this, especially when you start getting data from other sources. We mentioned one, like important KPIs, like close rate is an important KPI. You can't get that just from your practice data from the practice management system. You need phone data, for instance. Or how much time does your finance team spend auditing each location to say, did the payments coming into the bank account match what's in the practice management system? If you have both data, that audit becomes a lot quicker, potentially can be a lot quicker if done right. So that's just a couple of examples. But really there's so much you can do. We work with customers that are like primarily implants, right? And then if you're getting like a Jarvis or a Dental Intel for those type of customers or those type of dental offices, it doesn't quite match up. The metrics they care about, the KPIs they care about are not the same as a normal dental office. Mm-hmm. And so then you're kind of like, well, what do we do now? And so they just need access to the data.
All right. Would you say it's fair to say that the data warehouse is kind of the foundational piece for a lot of these things, like whether it's custom reports? And we had a call with a friend today, and she was talking about how sometimes people get really hung up on the actual reports, and really what brings value is the insights that come from those reports. I thought the way that she put that was really interesting and spot on. And, having a data warehouse where you get access to the raw data, where you now have the freedom and flexibility to discover the insights relative to how you run your practice or you run your business, or if you have financial data that you want to overlay on top of practice data or phone data or whatever it might be. It's foundational that you have all of that data unified in a single place. Otherwise, it's not even an option to do those types of things.
Yeah, you're kind of just stuck with what you can get off the shelf if you don't have the data that you control. So yeah, I would say if you're looking to take it to the next step, obviously the analytics providers are trying to provide insights as well. It's not just analytics, like they're all trying to add features that give you insights. But again, unless they're aggregating more and more of the data, those insights can only go so far, right? And can you take it to the next level? The data warehouse is the foundation to set it up and take it to the next level.
And then, as you talked about, AI or other things also become a block you can build on top of that foundation once you have a warehouse.
Yeah, and if you have a warehouse, usually they only stay up to date nightly or whatever every 24 hours, but at least you have a 24-hour snapshot of data that you control now. You don't have to call your practice management system and give them permission to, let a third party look at it. You can sign a business associate agreement with a third party and let them access your data warehouse without talking to anyone and without charging anyone. So it's foundational in a lot of ways, right? It's foundational for the future, but foundational, just having a good data infrastructure at your core allows you to do things that you could not do otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the state of data in most DSOs. And we had an episode with Jordan Trentacosta a few weeks ago where we talked about some of these things. But some of the challenges that a lot of DSOs face would be multiple practice management softwares. Maybe it's fragmented reporting, manual spreadsheets. We could call it like the data chaos problem. So do you have any comments or things that you would add about just the general state of data?
Yeah, I think this is a hard problem to solve. We have one customer that has several ortho offices and dental offices, and the data looks a little bit different, right? And so they're like, okay, well, we're trying to use Jarvis for our dental offices, and then we have to use Gauge for the ortho offices because they're different. Integrations are different. Those are the only ones that offer those integrations. So the data comes in a different format. And so if you're trying to get your data from those type of providers, it can be really hard because you're having to clean the data yourself. And I think most DSOs, unless you're the really big players, don't have a budget to have a data team that's like managing the the ingestion of the data, or what they call the ETL, which is like extracting the data, transforming it into a format that you can use, and then loading it into your data warehouse. That's what the ETL stands for. But you kind of need some sort of data team to do that if you're going to do it in-house. And I think some of the biggest players do it because they have a data team. But historically, I think it's been very difficult to do without a lot of time and resources.
Yeah. And so how does a data warehouse solve some of these problems, right? So like centralizing the data from multiple sources. What else can a data warehouse do?
Yeah, I think, like we were saying before, is it gives you a better insight to what's going on in your business. And so not only does it aggregate the data across locations, but like we were just talking about, having just a data warehouse alone is not going to solve data aggregation issues. Mm-hmm. So if you're dumping in data from multiple different analytics providers into one place, all that data is going to be different.
Yeah.
And so it's not just having a data warehouse, it's also having a system that unifies that data into one schema, essentially, so that you can actually, query it.
Yeah. So let's talk about, and I think we've touched on this, but just to kind of formalize this portion of the episode. So let's talk about some of the real world impacts that using a data warehouse can have on a DSO. Like if I'm a DSO and I take the time and energy and resources to invest into this, what are some of those real world impacts? And I'll just share one that comes to mind for me, just because we've spent a lot of time with one of our customers on this, and I think that it's a real benefit that a lot of DSOs could feel for themselves. But if you think about just operating faster, when it comes to like spreadsheets that I think a lot of organizations are still using, in this one particular customer, they would spend hours just getting data into spreadsheets so that it could be standardized across all, and the hours and the stress that it puts on the team members, and getting doctor payout and all of those things are just a little bit slower because of the manual effort that it takes at the beginning or end of every single month. So one real world benefit that I have seen that's pretty just close to us because we've spent a lot of time on it is just that the efficiency and how much faster it makes those types of what were previously very manual processes.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest and most immediate impact in a lot of cases is like, we're doing this tons of manual labor to get the data in. I think the customer that you mentioned, they have each office, they have like a series of reports that the office has to export. They upload them to Google Drive, and then someone at the central office spends hours and hours and hours inputting that into some sort of Excel spreadsheet or something where they can look at it. And if you have a system that kind of automates that transfer, you get a couple benefits. And one of the big ones is the time saving, but also the different practice management systems run the reports different. Mm-hmm. And so they might not be apples to apples. Whereas if you get access to the raw data, and if you at least work with someone that understands the nuances of the practice management systems, you can get a lot closer representation to apples, especially dealing with like claims or adjustments. Like all the systems handle those a little bit differently.
One conversation I remember having with this office was them talking about how this automating it will move them away from like administrative data entry, getting numbers, into leadership that can make decisions based off of what those numbers say.
Yeah.
So when you take that responsibility away from just gathering and aggregating, and now you free up leaders to actually get the insights and improve the practice based off of that, I think that's a huge benefit as well.
Yeah. It's actually interesting to see how many DSOs don't have data that they rely on regularly, or they have to wait a month to get access to that data. And so those situations are hard. And I think, they're dealing with a bunch of, especially if they're not unified in one system, they're dealing with a lot of differences in the data, and it's hard to compare. But now there's solutions out there that can help you take care of it. And I don't the last thing I want this to be is a commercial for us, because this podcast is not meant to be a commercial for us. And so I'm not going to talk a lot about call out on here. But yeah, this is what we do day in, day out. But we have other competitors out there too, right? Tab 32 being one of them, and I'll mention them because they have a good customer base and they're growing and they do the same type of stuff we do. And I think there's going to be more coming, right? I think there's a couple more we've run into that are smaller, but I think that the benefits are so clear at this point. This isn't a new concept, like enterprise software. Maybe, it's newer in dentistry, and even like the Heartlands of the world have been doing it for a while, right? The big players. But this is relatively new for dentistry, but it's been done in the enterprise software world forever. And so the nice thing is the barriers are coming down, so it's getting easier to do.
Yeah, and it's been more expensive in the past.
Yeah, so expensive.
Yeah. Maybe so much so that it wasn't necessarily an option in the past.
Yeah, like if you were a 10 location DSO, this was probably just not in the cards for you historically. But that's getting better, right? Getting cheaper.
Are there any other wins that you have seen DSOs experience through? I just mentioned that one example.
I mentioned a couple earlier, but like the finance team has a lot to gain on the audits. I think the KPI tracking, like I mentioned before, is a lot more powerful with multiple sources. And so those are real world wins, like absolutely, that we've seen customers embrace and get. And I think that's the exciting piece for me, is to see those, this data warehousing thing can make an impact to the bottom line and just make your business better. And it's like, I love that. I'm passionate about that.
And we heard from our conversation today in an article by our friend Matt McGraw. He had spoken about DSOs that had been acquired or had acquisitions. I think out of 50, the 7 that had centralized data and things like that. So
I wonder if I can find that post. I think it'd be good to like get it up and quote it.
Maybe we can put it in the comments. Maybe.
Yeah, let's find it and get it. But I guess
it was an interesting piece of data that
super interesting. That intrigued me to see. So having good data, and I think part of that is, we were talking. Can we just say Jill Nesbitt? We were talking to Jill Nesbitt. She's awesome. And she helps DSOs standardize on like a one practice management system. And in some ways, I'm like, it totally makes sense. Like if you are on one practice management system, it's much easier to get the data. And so it can be very clear to private equity. It's all apples to apples and they get it. And if you're not, it's a lot more work for them to understand your business and do the due diligence. And so it's harder. Unless you have a way to centralize it and unify it under one schema. Jordan will tell you that even then there's going to be some difficulties, and there will. But if you can centralize it under one schema, you're miles ahead of anyone else. And you don't have to force anyone to change their practice management system, which we know people hate.
And, we'll put that in the comments, but we just want to kind of open people's eyes and minds to some of the benefits of investing in these types of solutions.
I'm trying to find Matt McGaw's post, the one we're referencing. We'll have to find it. Put it in the comments. I don't see it.
I subscribe. Matt, we'll put it in there. So okay, let's wrap up. Just a couple more things. Let's just talk about tips that we would give to DSOs that would want to start to just investigate a data warehouse. Like where should they begin? What are those first steps? Common pitfalls to avoid? Those types of things. What would you say?
Gosh, that's awesome. I don't want this. I don't want this to be self-serving, but I'm happy to talk to anyone about it. And not in a salesy way. Just I will tell you what's out there, what's available, pricing, kind of what benefits you can get. Talk to me about what practice management systems you're doing, what's your long-term vision, how do you want to connect this to AI, and we can point you.
Yeah, I think that's so important to recognize from as far as first steps go, is there's a lot of nuance in why do you want a data warehouse? Like what are you trying to accomplish? What are your long-term goals? What are the pains that you're experiencing today because your data is fragmented or because you're missing some data? That before you go out there and just say, hey, we're going to get a data warehouse, it really is most beneficial to start with the end in mind a little bit. Like, what are we trying to do with this? Why? And then kind of work backwards.
Yeah, I love that. Start with the why, work your way backwards to see what's available. There's definitely some options, and there's a lot of options besides us. That would be a step, is find someone that's done it before. They're out there. I'm sure if you just reached out to Jordan Trentacosta on LinkedIn, she'd even answer your questions. She's great to work with, and she's more unbiased, right? Because she's done it for multiple DSOs, and so she's seen the pros and cons. And there's other consultants out there also that are big proponents of data warehousing that could also help you, point you in the right direction. Jill Nesbitt being one of them, who's becoming an expert at knowing the data side of things and the nuances between practice management systems. And so there's people out there.
And they will help you. The best consultants that I've talked to in this space that are doing these types of things are ones that are going to understand first what you're trying to accomplish, so that they can put the proper pieces in place with the warehouse or whatever, because there are rippling effects across your organization as you.
Yeah, if you talk to someone and they're just like throwing out solutions immediately, it's probably they may not understand the nuances. Like that's like the opposite of Jill. Mm-hmm. Like, she understands the nuances. She asks all the questions, and then she'll help you find a solution. And
same thing with Jordan too.
Yeah, Jordan too. Yeah,
Jordan. She's told me stories of where executives come to her and say like, "Hey, I want X, Y, and Z," and the first question that she's asking is, "Okay, well, why?" Seeking to understand what they really want versus just taking their first request at surface value.
Yeah,
because there's so many details underneath it. So yeah, find someone that's done it before. I think that's good advice. Make sure that they and you really get to the root of what you're trying to accomplish, so that it can all be structured the right way. What any other piece of advice?
No, I mean, I guess I'd still point out like the barriers are lower, but if you're like a 3-location DSO, you're probably a little bit premature. I think it's probably when you start hitting the 8, 9, 10 is when that's like, this is now priced to where you could afford it.
You'll get the benefits.
And you'll get the benefits. Yeah. So that would just be my only caveat, is you don't necessarily need it right away. Now, there are some great benefits, even if you're a solo practice, to getting multiple data sources in one place. So I'm not going to say don't ever do it. It just depends on how far along you are on your journey. If you're still using paper dental records, data warehouse is probably not for you.
Yeah. If you are using regular patient forms just on a piece of paper.
Yeah, you're probably not in the right. That's probably not the right place to go. You have lots of steps to get to where you need before.
Go find Jill. She will help you if that's you.
Yeah. When she said that, then I was like, oh, I didn't realize dentists still do that, but they do.
Yeah. Yeah. The things that we've been at this for a long time, and we still.
Yeah. You just don't. We primarily work with these early adopters, so we're not used to seeing that. Yeah.
But they're probably not listening to our podcast.
For sure not. They're not listening to Dental Disruptors. So.
If you are using patient forms, you have a long way to go.
Paper patient forms.
Paper patient forms.
If you're using paper patient forms and you're listening to Dental Disruptors, please message me and tell me. Like, that would be amazing.
We'd love to know who you are.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We hope, as Clint mentioned, that this doesn't feel or come across just like an advertisement for Kala. We feel like it is technology that people may or may not know very much about, and our purpose is to help people be aware of what a data warehouse is, some of the benefits that it can provide. We'd obviously love to speak with anybody and help out where we can and point you in the right direction. But we appreciate you following us and subscribing. If you do have questions, you can comment and stuff. We'll respond there, and we will post Matt's article. I'll find that one and post it in the comments. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks.